In this video, I want to talk about the 8 biggest issues that I've found with the DJI FLIP. So if you're ready, let's get into it. Now, before we get into these 8 issues, I just want to mention this is still an awesome drone. These are just some quirks that I've found with this drone, and depending on how you're planning to use it, it might be something that you would want to know about before you went out and bought this drone. Now, a couple of good things about this drone. Shoots 4K, 10-bit footage. It's got this design that flips down. Like, this is really cool. And it's got built-in propeller guards. So if you compare this to something like the Mini 4 Pro, this has built-in propeller guards, but still packs up about as small as the Mini 4 Pro, and it has the same camera. So it's a pretty awesome drone. And I've done a bunch of videos on this channel already that show you that you could get really good footage with this drone. However, let's talk about these 8 issues that I found. Number 1, this has to do with tracking. So when you hand launch this drone and you want it to follow you, even if you put it into the far setting using the phone app, the drone is a little bit too close. And so the footage that you get, your body basically fills the frame when you're walking. And that's an important distinction, and I'll show you why in a second. But when you're walking, the drone's gonna be fairly close, even though you're in a far setting. And depending on if it's low, flat, or high, bottom half of your body starts to get cut off. So like your feet would get cut off or your legs. And it's just not the best for a follow mode. Like you want it to be just a little bit further so you could have your full body isolated with some space around it. And also you don't want too much headroom. So there's not a whole lot of control besides saying low, medium, high, or close, medium, far in terms of controlling the hand launch follow mode. Now this actually changes a little bit when you start moving faster. So here's some footage when I was trail running, and once you pick up the speed a little bit, you do get a proper shot in this follow mode. So it really depends on how fast you're moving. I'd like the option to be able to change that far setting and make it even further so that when you are walking, you could set it to be even further when you're walking. Now, this might be some limitation that has to do with if you're moving fast and you're too far away, it's gonna lose you. That makes sense, but there should be an option or some way that you could tell the drone, hey, I'm only gonna be walking. I want the drone to sit a little bit further away. Now, when you're using the controller, you could set your distance manually so you could track at a distance and get the shot that you want. You have full control when you're using the controller to be able to position yourself anywhere in the frame to do your tracking, and it will track you in that spot. So a lot more flexibility when you use your controller versus just hand launching on the drone. And that's kind of the biggest issue number 2. And that is the tracking options are a little bit different from phone hand launching versus controller. On the controller, you could follow, but only from the back. There is no direction track option. Whereas on the drone, you could follow from the front. You could do a walk and talk. And it actually has a feature that's built in to automatically follow you from the front when you're walking. You can't do that on the controller. However, with the controller, like I said, you have full manual control to position yourself anywhere in the frame when you're in a follow mode, but it's only gonna follow you from behind. So that's one thing that's kind of weird between the tracking with the drone and just the controller. Now, the next issue is that there's no manual controls for your exposure on the phone. So when you're just recording using your phone or just hand launching, basically have an auto camera. It's gonna auto expose, and if you change direction, it's gonna fluctuate the exposure. And that applies to your color as well. So if you're in white balance, it's gonna be auto white balance. So you really have no control over your image in terms of exposure or color. Whereas when you're using the controller, you could set everything manually. And so when I've been flying just using my phone, I have to rely on the auto settings of the camera and just position the drone right so that I could get good footage. And I can't really control the image that well. Whereas on the controller, you could really fully customize the image by setting your manual controls, putting on your ND filter, and really getting a specific look that you want. And I made another video showing how you could get cinematic footage using the DJI FLIP. And you could see how well you could actually control all this footage when you are in manual settings. And that's the next biggest issue when it comes to the Flip, is that there is no way to lock your exposure in the phone. So it's fully auto. You move around, it's gonna fluctuate. So you just don't have any control over your image when you're on the phone. And this goes to one of the next biggest issues, which is on the controller, you have access to sharpness and noise reduction. Whereas on the phone, you have none of that. So on the controller, you could bring your sharpness and your noise reduction down to -2 if your image is feeling too sharp or it's too blocky from the noise reduction. Whereas when you're just flying this with your phone, you don't have those settings. So you're basically left at the standard look that comes straight out of the box. So you have no control over that image. Now, another big issue is the Wi-Fi on the phone. Now, this is probably not something that you could really change because it's just an issue with Wi-Fi in general, but when you're flying with your phone, you don't have a whole lot of range. I was actually flying this up on a mountain around here. I flew it a distance away, and then I realized that I lost connection, and it wasn't really getting back, and it wasn't even that far, and I was just kind of waiting for the phone to connect. I had to run underneath it. I was sitting there with my phone under the drone trying to get it to connect, and it finally did, so I was able to bring it back down. And this comes to the next issue. When you're using the phone and Wi-Fi, there's no return to home feature. So if your drone does get lost, so it's up there in the sky and you're trying to get signal, it's just going to sit there and hover until it runs out of battery, and then it's just going to descend. So you have to be very cautious when you're flying phone only to make sure that you're not going over anything where that if the drone descends down into it, you lose it forever. So like if you're flying over water, might not be the best idea, because if you lose connection to your phone and you can't regain that connection, it's just going to descend into the water. It'd be great if there was some way to like have the drone come back to where the phone was, or set a home point using your phone. So you want to make sure that when you're flying with a phone and you're not using the controller, that you're not flying too far away, you're not flying too high, and also you're keeping it over areas where the drone could descend if you lose connection. And then the last thing is that there's no audio if you connect it to the controller the same way that you could connect it to the phone. So if you're using your phone, you could hook up audio and you could record sync audio to your drone. And so you could do a walk and talk, and the drone is recording both audio and video. But with the controller, you can't track from the front. You can't record audio the same way. So there's no way to do really a walk and talk unless you're recording separate. So the way that I would do it is I would record a backup recording on DJI Mic 2 and then visually do a clap sync and then connect them in my editing software. So those are some of the interesting quirks between the controller and the phone and just working with the DJI FLIP. However, this is an awesome drone. And if you want to see a full breakdown of every feature that you find in the DJI FLIP, I did a full 2-hour beginner's guide that shows you everything about this drone, and I highly suggest you check that out. So I'll see you